know, we do have a very interesting guest tonight and an interesting conversation planned. Our guest is the author of a journalistic novel about a fundamentalist Mormon group that lives along the Utah-Arizona state line. He was a southern Utah newspaperman for 16 years, working for the Spectrum in St. George as a reporter, a columnist, and a city editor. And during that time, he wrote stories and columns and directed his staff as it covered the FLDS polygamous community, including the manhunt and the subsequent arrest and conviction of the group's self-proclaimed prophet, Warren Jeffs. I would like to introduce and welcome our guest tonight, Ed Casilla.
Good to be here with you, Doris.
Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for asking.
Come all the way from St. George.
Oh, well, it wasn't too bad. It was a nice day.
It was a beautiful day.
Beautiful.
Okay, well, you have written a book. We're going to start with that first, and I think we're going to have a graphic on the screen, but it's called Pligs, right? And you've written this book about it's a fictional based on some facts?
Well, I call it a journalistic novel because there's historic fact that is intertwined with the story of this family that is a creation, a composite of people that I've met over the years and researched to help move the storyline across, of course. And it's a historic novel that's sort of a hybrid sort of a thing that kind of tells the story of the history behind polygamy and the effects on the modern day world.
Yeah, and you made the remark that this is a book that the Mormon fundamentalists do not want people to read. Why is that?
Well, Doris, we have a situation, as you well know, where it's very secretive out in the desert community out there, Hilldale, Colorado City, or Short Creek as they call it. Things are done clandestinely. There's a reason they picked that part of Utah in Arizona. It's remote. It's removed from the general population, and things go on out there outside the law, outside of the normal society, and it's easier to disguise, to be secretive, and to carry on out there.
It is, and you had a particular motivation for writing the book?
You know, yeah, it started a few years after I arrived here and began work at the newspaper. Started hearing, you know, you come to Utah and one of the things that you hear is Mormon polygamy and whatever, and you don't have any background, you don't have any detail, and you go, oh, okay, fine, you know, but then you start talking to people and you start hearing the stories. You start seeing the court cases come across, and suddenly some bells and whistles start flashing and ringing, and sooner or later the story becomes beyond just the quirkiness of whatever. It becomes a human story because you see faces attached to it. You learn about children. You learn about abuses, and it becomes a story from here rather than the intellectual part of it.
Oh, very good. Where can our readers or our viewers buy the book to read?
It's on Amazon.com.
Amazon.com.
Yes.
Okay, so I highly recommend the book. I would suggest that you pick it up and read it. It is a good story, very good storyline.
Thank you.
A woman that we both know left a polygamy situation several years ago, and she was lamenting recently on Facebook that how when she did leave that she had been disrespected, that false witnessing lies about her had been told, plus general shunning, which this culture is very good at. And I want to quote something that you wrote to her, and I'm going to put it up on the screen and then ask you about it. And so I'm quoting what you said to her. You said, "I have never seen so many disrespectful and selfish people as I have in Utah. There is an arrogance, a prejudice, a selfishness, a clanness that is in great dispute with the wholesome and so-called righteous image the state maintains. There is little tolerance nor compassion for those who do not follow the path of the dominant culture," end quote. Now I hear and see this attitude myself, and I talk to people who come here from out of the area who have experienced the same thing themselves. Why is it this way?
It goes back, Doris, to the secretive nature of the culture, of the fundamentalist beliefs system. If you do not fit into that group, you're told go back where you came from. You hear that so many times.
Heard a lot, yeah.
Go where you came from.
Well, that started with Brigham Young, didn't it? When they first settled here?
Well, I'm not that old, but but yeah, we've heard it. Go back where you came from. Don't bring that place here. This is different, and I understand that. But I mean, there's little understanding and compassion for people who may have an opposing view to express, who may want to be exercising their own particular belief system or just comfort or privacy.
I just heard on the Fox News this past couple of days that Salt Lake City was rated as being the most superficial city in the United States. That kind of fits in with that, doesn't it? I mean, where they look at the outside and don't bother with the inside. Do you make good money? Do you have a good job? Are you good education? And it's very superficial is how they judge.
It's all image.
Yeah.
It's smoke and mirrors image,
Yeah.
and it's how do you look and how do you present yourself, and often forgetting about there's somebody deep under the skin there.
And do you think that comes from the early polygamous culture where it was so secretive? Be like one of us, or you're out of here.
Well, the whole structure, particularly in that society of fundamentalists and polygamy, is indoctrination from birth, from cradle to grave. Your salvation depends on the image you portray. It's have you ever seen a sister wife in public that didn't have a plastered on smile?
No, I don't think I have.
It's how you portray it. It's the image.
Now, you have been in the media, and so this next question I'm going to ask you in regards to the media. They seem to refuse to cover, or they're hesitant to cover the aspect of religion as it relates to polygamy. They either totally ignore it, or they say, we'll keep religion out of it. We want to get into the story of it. But the purpose of Mormon polygamy is religious. Joseph Smith got a revelation from God. You had to live it. It's a new and everlasting covenant. You can't go to heaven unless you do it. So if it's not a religious issue, what is it?
Well, it is a religious issue, and anybody who doesn't recognize that should probably not be writing news stories or reporting the news. On an intellectual level, they always come back to it's consenting adults and whatever they decide, and it's like, okay, wait, stop right there. What we're talking about here is not consenting adults. I mean, we're talking, why is Warren Jeffs in jail? Mm-hmm. Ask his 12-year-old and 14-year-old wife how much consent they had. Mm-hmm. When we talk about the issues, there's a deeper context, and unfortunately, I think that some in the media, the kids as we call them, they're all kids to us now at this point.
Yeah.
Don't take the time to be aggressive and to dig and to do their homework, and they're not understanding that this is not simply an issue of choice between consenting adults, that it goes into such things as bleeding the beast, the defrauding of the government, the child abuse in labor relations and taking them out into the fields and working in the construction sites, the women's rights issues, and of course the little girls that are placed into marriage as soon as they hit puberty.
Right. And Mormon polygamy is actually the only religion that requires sex to get to heaven, and sex with a married man in order to get to heaven.
Yes, technically. I mean, when we look at the we look at the bigamy laws, it's what's going on.
Yeah, and God ordained.
Yes.
So it is a religious issue.
Yes, it definitely is a religious issue.
People frequently say that abuse in polygamy is no different than abuse in monogamy. Is that true or false?
It's very true. It's much different when you're into polygamy because, again, the religious issue comes into it. And you're talking about something, that your eternal salvation is at stake. You have religion that is being held over you and coercing you into the belief that, as being a part of the sister wives, that you're going to get your salvation. Mm-hmm. Having as many babies as you can and serving your husband and smiling and being obedient and all. That's what's going to get you there, There's no choice. It's indoctrinated from the early age. So that's what makes it more dangerous and what makes it so even more egregiously terrible.
Mm-hmm. And very often, I know it happened with me, and I know it continues to happen today, that they will tell the kids as they grow up, don't talk about what goes on inside the group. Don't let anyone outside the group know. So if someone is abused, they don't dare tell about it.
Well, it was the old,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. Well, let's talk about the legalization. It's a big thing that's coming up. We have a court case going. Canada actually went through this. I shouldn't say suffered. They went through this a couple of years ago and decided to keep polygamy illegal. And now we're going through that here. What's the difference between decriminalizing or legalizing polygamy? And is either one a bad idea?
I don't like either idea. I think what happens with decriminalization is you have an attempt to say, we really don't care one way or another, but at least we have something on the books to keep you in line. Yeah. That's, I think, what the decriminalization boils down to. Legalization takes it all off the books, and I think what happens if you legalize it, you just open it up, because it's not going to be a situation where every spiritual marriage suddenly becomes a legal marriage. I don't think it would stop the child abuse at all. I think it would continue on. It would still be a part of it, because it's endemic to the culture.
Women's rights, is that going to change?
No, it's not going to change women's rights at all. And again, there would still be no freedom of choice. You wouldn't be able to decide who you would like to marry. You couldn't go who you're going to go to the prom if you're even still allowed to go to school. It's neither one is good.
It's not going to change what each polygamy group has as their doctrine and the way they apply their doctrine to their everyday life.
No.
And to the lives of those in there.
Impact.
Won't do that at all. Polygamy and bigamy are against the law in Utah, and both attorneys general, our previous attorney general Mark Shurtleff and John Swallow, they both had chosen not to pursue polygamy, the prosecution of polygamy. Do you have any idea why they would disrespect the rule of law in this case?
Absolutely. It's politics. It's for the election. I would challenge John Swallow anytime to discuss the issue. I would like to know how much campaign money came from Short Creek into his campaign. I would like to know exactly why, John, you are doing this, why you are ignoring the law. Is it so you can be reelected? What's the reason behind it? So he will not answer and will not go public, saying basically, safety net is out there and whatever. That's a dodge.
So the constituency and maybe it's job security.
Well, job security, he remembers what happened to the gentleman who prosecuted Tom Green. Next election, he was tossed out by the voters. He won his case against a polygamist.
That's right.
And the voters tossed him out the next November.
So the constituency in the area, and it was Levitt's, Governor
Levitt's brother, yes.
And the constituency in that area of Utah were a highly population of polygamy.
Yes, and they threw him out next election.
Yeah, which kind of surprised me, and I was really quite sad about that. But the polygamists are on TV all the time. They complain that they are afraid that they're going to be arrested or afraid that they're going to be discriminated against. But I don't ever see that happening, do you? They're on TV, they have TV shows, they're regularly interviewed, and no one's afraid of being arrested.
Nobody's afraid of being arrested. Simply because Mark Shurtleff and John Swallow have said they're not going to be. They're not going to go to jail for this. So but it looks good, okay? It draws sympathy, and it draws people who go, oh, those poor folks, they're being religiously persecuted. Well, not really.
There are people who maintain that the criminal penalty of polygamy has done more harm than good because it forces secrecy. Is that a good reason to decriminalize it?
No, there is no good reason to decriminalize it. It's going to remain secret no matter what, particularly let's look at what it is. You're looking again at the situations of bleeding the beast. How many of those children out in Short Creek or in the northern Utah area or in Canada or South Dakota or in western Colorado have seen a father's name on their birth certificate? How many of those women, can claim a husband legitimately? Mm-hmm. No, there's.
It's not going to change it. Decriminalizing is not going to change that at all. If anyone wants to go on and really look at some of the online comments about legalizing or decriminalizing polygamy, it's really quite funny sometimes and discouraging to read some of the comments.
And sad, you get into an intellectual level of people that'll say, well, they're adults and they should be able to choose. And if it was adults, and if it was simply adults, then you could stop and consider what they're saying. but there's such a deep context around it that you cannot simply just say it's a lifestyle choice. There is such a coercion from, again, cradle to grave by the religious fanatic that runs that group, that there's no choice. So you cannot simply just say, well, what adults want to do, let them do. It's much bigger than that.
It is bigger than that. I want to quote, I think I've got 3 quotes that I picked up online that I would like to pass by and see what you say. And I'll put them up on the screen so that our viewers can read what these comments were as we talk about them. The first one, and I quote, "By making polygamy illegal, we make it necessary for polygamists to live in secrecy. There's a lack of accountability, and those in a position of power and authority can more easily corrupt their power and authority. Legalizing polygamy would bring polygamy out in the open, so it would be more difficult for leaders to get away with abuses of power," end quote. Do you think that legalizing polygamy would cause the polygamists to be held more accountable for their abuses in power?
Absolutely not. What legalization of polygamy would do, it would completely turn all eyes away from it. How many times when a couple goes into the county clerk to get a marriage license, is that investigated? Do they look and see what's happening with that? No, you go in, you pay your money, you fill out your paperwork, and then you go get married. Okay, so what's going to happen in this situation? It's going to turn into the same. Just fewer eyes will be looking at it. There won't be the curiosity factor. There won't be the oversight of any kind, because if it's legal, then it's legal, right?
Or decriminalized, either
decriminalized.
way.
It's the same thing. So what's going to happen is that with fewer eyes, it allows more abuses to take place because they're not being examined. At least that's my feeling.
Well, I happen to agree with you. If polygamy becomes legal, how would that anyway suddenly cause polygamists to start obeying the laws? I mean, they've disregarded the laws of the past. Why would they all of a sudden start obeying the other laws that they don't like?
Well, we live in a community, the Utah community. I know a number of people that don't believe that you need to have a driver's license. Why should the government issue your license? You have a right to drive. They can't tell you can or can't. I know of people that don't buy a hunting license. Those deer are up there and they're mine. We have a bit of a renegade mindset in some areas. People just taking off and saying, no, we don't like government oversight of any kind. Even though we do need to have driver's licenses, and we do need to have certain.
Certainly, and it's protection of our people. So legalizing polygamy then wouldn't change the child marriage or the rape or the child labor or the authoritarian power, the financial cheating.
No, I don't think it would have any impact on that whatsoever. All it would do, again, would be to turn more eyes away from the situation, and once that happens, then I mean, the gates are open. And we've seen, I mean, the building that they built for Warren Jeffs, the complex out there, $30 million. The complex in Texas, millions of dollars. They have property in South Dakota and Western Colorado, millions of dollars. Okay, where'd it come from? And now, if you turn away any and all attention from the group, what's it going to multiply into?
Oh yeah, for sure. Good point. The second online quote I'd like to, and it'll go up on the screen as well, and I quote, "If polygamy between consenting adults was legalized, it would stop underage marriages or else drive underage marriages underground, which would make it more difficult to prevent them," end quote. So if protection against underage polygamous marriages hasn't already happened, how will decriminalizing it or legalizing it make the protection happen?
It's a vacant argument. I mean, all right, we've had Mark Shurtleff, and now we have John Swallow, and virtually they have decriminalized polygamy, and has it put a dent into it?
It's made it worse, hasn't it?
Yes.
It's given them more power.
Yeah. So they haven't done anything with it. It has not changed a thing.
One person made the remark that they thought that what would happen would be that it would be turned around for the people who do want to get out, and they would say, oh, well, it's legal now, you can't leave.
You know, that's another argument that I just don't buy into, because we're talking of a repressive situation. Again, you are raised from the time of birth that this is your pathway to the celestial kingdom, and this is the only way you're going to make it. And if you don't, then eternal damnation. Okay, wait a minute. How are you going to change that mindset if that's all you've ever learned? You know, no, I don't see that happening.
Okay. And the third quote: "If polygamy is legalized, there will be a way to educate these girls so they know they will not be blamed for being victimized, and they and their children will be protected." Why can't they be educated and protected now? Why does it have to be decriminalized to do that?
Well, that's a good point. You know, look who has the most immediate impact on those women and children. You know, it's their parents, it's their mothers and their fathers, it's their brothers and sisters, the older people in the community. And are they about to tell them that you can get away, you should get away, this is wrong? No, because they've been too deep into it for too long. So who's going to educate them? Who's going to go out there and do that?
And even trying to, and that's what we try to do now, even, is educate through print media, radio, TV, newspaper, whatever. We try to educate the polygamists, and is
Well, one of the things that kind of makes that kind of a lost cause, though, is that, you know, one of Warren's edicts is you can't have newspapers, you can't have radios, you can't have TVs, you can't have magazines, you can't have the internet. So how do you get through?
how do you educate them?
How do you get skywriting?
And
What
so,
are you going to do?
So legalizing polygamy is not going to change.
It's not gonna
To
change.
open the community so you can walk in there with your library and
All it will really do is it'll turn more eyes away from it, and it'll just open it up for more abuses.
in fact, they had a library down there and it got burned down, right? Didn't they burn all the books?
They had the school situation where they got all of the money funding for the new school, and then as soon as they got all of the money into the community, all the children were ordered into homeschooling, and the books and all the equipment and all that sort of thing went into the parents. There's a school down there that has weeds 7 feet tall. I've seen it. There hasn't been a soul in that school in I don't know how many years.
We helped a lady out of their, well, and this is normal. It's not, you know, an exception. But she, in her early 20s, and she only had a second grade education.
That's not uncommon.
No, it's not uncommon at all.
You know, and the sadness is that there are instances where youngsters really try to get away, and the really sorrowful part about it is, you know, first of all, if you've got a 14, 15-year-old girl that's trying to escape being placed into a marriage, where's she going to go?
That's exactly right.
Secondly, if she is somehow assisted to get away from the town, sooner or later she's going to have contact with the police, and what's going to happen then?
They'll take her
Because she's a
back.
minor, they're going to take her
They'll take her
back to
back.
mom and dad, and then what happens? You think it was bad before.
She's worse off than the
What
beginning.
happens then?
It's sad. That's true in all the groups, not just that. It's true in the group that I came from, and it's true in the other groups as well. Trying to escape, and that's what I meant at the beginning. If it's such a wonderful lifestyle, why are so many people trying to escape? And why do they stop them from escaping?
The God Squad.
Yeah. There are those people who hear the word polygamy and their immediate impression is sister wives and big love, and what they know about polygamy comes from these television shows and what they present to the public. What is the public naive about polygamy?
Absolutely. Otherwise, the public would have a much larger outcry against it. It's not Sister Wives or My Three Wives or even Big Love. I mean, those guys all have money coming in from their TV jobs. These are TV stars. They are not
that's
real
true.
people. Okay,
That's true.
they're not normal of the situation. They're not being secretive. They found a way to cash in on their lifestyle to become a celebrity as a result of it. You know, there is publicity to be found for the Brown family and the Darger family by going into court and by thumbing their nose at the law. Then it creates, as you know, controversy creates viewers for TV. You know, and so that's what they're doing, is they're thumbing the nose and flying it, and it creates more viewers. More viewers creates more money, more sponsorships. I mean, that's how it works.
As a newspaper reporter yourself, when you investigated some of these things that were going on, were they sister wives' homes that you discovered when you were on the beat with reporting polygamy?
Yeah, and it was nothing like what the Brown family lives in.
Yeah.
You know, the homes out in Short Creek aren't not that nice. You know?
And the families aren't necessarily
and the families are not terribly literate that we've run into, and there are situations of just complete and total submission.
Right. Exactly. That's the way it is in the group that I came from as well. The Dargers and the Browns both claim that technically they're only married to one wife legally, and so the polygamy charge can't. They're not doing anything illegal. They're not breaking the law. Is that the way it is?
Well, you know, I once read a thing where it said any man who represents himself in a courtroom has a fool for a lawyer. It's one of those fallacies of law, thinking that, oh, well, if we only marry one and the rest are spiritual, it doesn't count. Well, wrong. In Utah law, the bigamy law says that if you purport to be married, then you are breaking the law. So by cohabitation and having kids, and by presenting yourself even in a spiritual wife relationship with the husband, you are purporting to be married, and you are indeed breaking the law. So I don't know how they come up with that.
Rationalization, perhaps.
Could be.
Welcome back to our show. This is Polygamy What Love Is This? And I'm your host, Doris Hanson. And we have our guest tonight with us, Ed Casilia. He is a former newspaper columnist for The Spectrum in St. George, covered a lot of the beat of the polygamy stories, and with Warren Jeffs when he was being pursued and on the FBI 10 Most Wanted list, and his arrest, and of course his going to court and all that. You must have had quite an exciting time dealing with that particular thing. It was
very interesting. We had international press from the courthouse all the way down on the St. George Boulevard. It was a madhouse, you know. The TV antenna trucks and all of the reporters and the passersby and the interested parties, and then just the curious going, what in the world is going on here?